Hey guys, welcome back to We Got Balls, and we are here for another conversation about you and your recovery. And Scott, today what we want to talk about is that other R word, not the recovery word, but that R word, relapse. Relapse. And if you're listening today and you're like, I am tired of relapsing, and you just, all the emotions in your body just get riled up about, I do it again and I do it again. And why can't I stop this behavior? I'm so frustrated. I want you to listen in, and there's going to be some really important aspects of our conversation that are going to help you be kinder to yourself. The issue with relapse is not that it's happening, it's what you believe about it when it's happening. And so we want to talk about that and listen in on that. But Scott, I know I've done a lot of recovery training, and one of the things that stood out to me when I was being trained in the recovery process, and specifically my training was both behavioral and substance, is that this idea that relapse is part of recovery. Relapse is part of recovery. And that just sounded crazy to me when somebody said that out loud.
Yeah.
The fact that falling back into my behaviors and getting stuck was just part of the process. And I'm like, surely it can't be. Surely there's got to be something that's there that's going to make this stop. And I can just have this sobriety that I'm longing for and not deal with the behavior anymore. So as I'm talking about all this stuff, what's coming up in your body?
Good question. I think I can definitely relate to relapse because I had a major one. And it was somewhat public, and it was excruciating and painful and harmful to my wife and me and some of the guys I coach. And yeah, it was a train wreck. But I also experienced necessary change in the midst of that. And so, looking back on it now in hindsight, it was in 2021 that it was actually 2020. That I started to undergo a major relapse, and it lasted for about a year. And then everything kind of came to light and came crashing down around me. And you would think, well, that's the end of Scott doing his coaching thing. And, I should just give it up. And
you're disqualified, Scott. Of course, when you fail one time, that totally takes you out of the game. And that means that you're not perfect. And so therefore you need to just quit.
And there were people that actually said that to me, like, you should just stop and go away somewhere and get healing, which was nice. I think there was a kindness in that to a degree, but I also think it was kind of pharisaical, like, oh, you've blown it, you're done, you're toast.
Wait, so we got to suss that out, dude. So there was a kindness in their response, but it was also pharisaical. I have a hard time putting those two ideas in the same.
You are the kindest Pharisee I have ever.
You're the kindest son of a bitch I know. Thank you so much.
When you stab me in the back, it feels really good.
you hug me. You hug me right as you sink the knife deeply
and then slide it up my spine.
Right. So again, and I am not judging people's responses, because we're all broken, and nobody does this well. Nobody handles the tension and the complexity of brokenness well, because in order to do that, I've got to have dealt with it in my own body, in my own heart, in my own story. And so a lot of people, like you're talking about, they have I don't know if you've ever read C.S. Lewis. You ever read C.S. Lewis before?
Yeah, sure.
So, he wrote a book early in his career called The Problem of Pain. And it was about suffering and struggle and what the point of it was. And it was very intellectual and academic. And he had a lot of great principles and truths in there that he really stood by. And then later in his life, he got married, and his wife got cancer, and she died. And he wrote another book called A Grief Observed, because this is what we've been talking about for a while. There's a huge difference between the experience of truth and an intellectual understanding of principles. And I think a lot of people that try to help people in relapse have a intellectual understanding of what should be done. And I want to give you this caveat. When you hear the word should, there should be like a highlighter that surrounds the words there should be a highlighter that illustrate the words around that word should, because somebody's telling you this is how you can be fixed, rather than I'm here to be with you.
Which is where we get the term quit shooting all over yourself.
Because, yeah, I mean, good therapist language, right?
Right. But you're so right that but this is very American. I mean, this is the way of the United States culture. We love to idealize people. We love to set them on pedestals. And then when they fall, we love to piss on the fire that we've set on, that we've lit around them to burn them on the pyre. And then we love it when they return. We come back. Look at Robert Downey Jr. as a great example of this. He just won the Academy Award for, Best Supporting Actor in Oppenheimer, but Robert Downey Jr. was persona non grata when he was going through his addictive phase, and he was a big star before that. He crashed and burned. Everybody loved to mock him and ridicule him, and now he's returned, and we love those comeback stories just as much as we love the Schadenfreude. We love it when somebody suffers.
Well, I mean, think about the arc of story itself. Is the redemption story is the best story. And here's a guy who literally went to prison for his drug addiction. And he was blackballed by the industry. And he comes back and he's in a couple projects. And one of those projects becomes the genesis of the last 15 years of film, which is the Marvel Universe. Without Robert Downey Jr., I would argue there is no Marvel Universe.
There's no Marvel Universe.
It's based upon his personality.
Yeah.
Unless Tony Stark is this charismatic and dynamic personality, nobody gives a crap about more superheroes that are running around in crazy suits. It's the human experience. And so when we're talking about relapse, we really need to tune into this complexity that is humanity. There are things that are good for me that I know I need to be doing. And notice I didn't say the word should. I didn't say that word because I softened it by saying the word need. I need to be doing these things. Or maybe I don't need to be doing these things. And yet I go back and if you read your Bibles, you've heard this phrase, the things I want to do, I don't do. And the things I don't want to do, I keep doing. And here is the essence of relapse. Romans 7 is a relapse passage. Sorry for those of you who think that we're not all struggling with addictions in some form or fashion. It truly is about the struggle to be faithful as a human being.
I would say Galatians is a relapse book, if you want to look at Galatians too, because what you have going on in Galatians is Paul publicly calling out one of the other key apostles, Peter, for his hypocrisy, but basically the same basic flaw that Peter's struggling with on the night he, betrays Jesus by saying, no, I don't know that guy. I don't know that guy. I don't know that guy 3 times. Now Peter is doing this 15 years later. We know pretty well when Galatians was written. We know that there was at least 15 years between the resurrection of Jesus and the writing of Galatians. And 15 years later, one of Jesus' key guys is still struggling with the same basic flaw. He's afraid of people.
Yeah. He's trying to be a people pleaser. Sound familiar, Scott? You ever been a people pleaser? Yeah. You ever met any of those?
Yeah, that would be me.
Yeah. Hello.
I'm looking at one. So we talk about American culture loves this whole, build them up and tear them down and build them back up again. So does, I was going to say so does the church, but I'm not so really sure that the church actually likes to build you up again after you fall.
No, the church likes you to keep torn down because then it continues this idea that there is a place of perfection that I can attain. So since there is no place of perfection that any human being can attain, because the idea of moral perfection isn't in the Bible, message me if you want to know more. Then what do we do with this idea of relapse? Here we have this concept where I go back to the things that I'm trying to stop. What does it say about me? How can I be helped in this very desperate, dark place?
And let's just define the categories here for a little bit. So I've used these. I don't know if you like these or not, but slip is a one-time, sporadic, oops, I looked at porn and masturbated. Okay, so we call that a slip. A relapse would be, or a binge would be, when I put a lot of slips together in the course of a weekend and I sit there and I masturbate to porn for 24 hours or 3 days or whatever, and that's a binge. I think we all kind of get that. But relapse would be when you take those slips and binges and you string them together in a series of weeks, months, maybe even years. Who knows? I don't know.
So I would suggest that this whole conversation can deal with all three of those things. I think the reality is that we need kindness toward ourselves in the short term, the midterm, and the long term. And so, but I think what you're talking about is especially true when you go back to the well of an addictive behavior process and you kind of, and usually this is the case, when you go to a true relapse as you've defined it, it's not just going back to the old stuff, it's adding new stuff to it. So you go further than you've ever gone before.
So if I can be a little vulnerable about that, I started my practice in 2020. I met you in the fall when we were doing training with Jay Stringer. And in the midst of that training, my wife discovered that I'd been sexting with other people since May of 2020. So here we are in October and she discovers this and she's livid. Now I've been in recovery at that point about 7 years. And I haven't had any major slip ups with pornography or anything else. And I'd never sexted anybody. So, we've talked about this in, I think, the sexting podcast episode, but I'll just give the details again. Here is, during that time period, my daughter, who had struggled with a 21-year substance abuse issue, was back in our lives. We're raising our grandchildren because we had to do that for their safety. And she's back, and her husband is back from working overseas, where he'd been working all of the children's lives, and now he wants to take custody of the kids. He's estranged from my daughter. There was tons of stress cropping up in my life, and at the same time as I'm starting to promote my business, I get out there on social media and start to maintain a presence out there, and people started to solicit me. And I resisted that for a while until I started to feel really lonely. This was during COVID, right? So we're all locked down. I'm not meeting with my in-person recovery group anymore. We're doing Zoom meetings, and I'm feeling very cut off and very alone and very stressed out. And then I have guys, soliciting me in sexual conversations and wanting to exchange pictures. And I end up succumbing to that, and that gets exposed. And that's a new behavior. Never done it. So I'm ashamed. I'm embarrassed. I confessed it to you and all the guys in our training with Jay. Everybody was really kind and gracious to me there. And my wife was angry, but she was willing to continue working on the marriage and didn't want to push the eject button. And I confessed it to all the guys that I was coaching. And again, they were gracious and understood and appreciated my honesty about what was going on. But I didn't understand what was causing that. And so here I was involved in a behavior that I'd never done before. And I didn't really see the connection between my current experience nor the stories in my past. And it seemed like this was coming out of nowhere, but of course it wasn't. And it really took the kindness that I got from you and other friends and even my wife to have the courage to get back in therapy and start engaging my story. And thank God I was doing training on story work with Jay Stringer and you at the time. And it invited me to be more curious about what was going on. So rather than approaching that relapse there with self-contempt, which is how I typically dealt with myself, out of my shame, I would hate myself and punish myself in certain ways. And self-contempt is a form of self-punishment, right? To pay for the fact that I'm a flawed, worthless, bad person. I mean, who coaches other guys in sexual addiction recovery and then sends pictures of his naked body to other guys? A really bad person. So that's what I told myself.
first of all, I want to acknowledge, Scott, thank you for sharing that. And second of all, I just want to relay the groundwork for what you just shared. On top of the childhood wounding and trauma that you experienced as a young person, you have this dynamic. You have isolation in a season when you had connection because of COVID. You had kind of re-engaging a lot of pain and struggle with your daughter and her husband moving back in with you guys. You have their kids living with you. You're raising their kids. You're starting a new business. You know, you're putting yourself out there and being bold to invite men to do their work. And these men that you're targeting to support and help them heal actually become people who invite you back into your addiction, back into your struggle. And so it makes perfect sense why this would be an easy thing to do. Put yourself in Scott's shoes, guys. I just want to invite you to empathy for a moment. If you say, I would never do that, stop for a second. Because I would have done that. I can definitely see myself going there. It makes total sense to me how Scott got to that place and got to that very dark place in his recovery and also in his behavior. Let's say it again. If we don't say it every time, maybe we need to just make it a mantra. The behavior is symptomatic. It is pointing us towards the dangers and the warning lights in our life. And so when you talk about that, Scott, you know, I can come at it one of two ways. I can go from this place of, now, Scott, that is not something you should be doing. Listen to my words. That is not something you should be. You know better than that. That's not who you are. You're a recovery coach. How are you going to help guys if you're struggling yourself? And all that shame and all that self-contempt and all that badness that's in your body from your past and your present comes back to the surface, and it just reinforces it, and it becomes false. It becomes disintegrated. And that splits you apart and makes it even more likely that you're going to say, fuck it. I'm just going to go do what I got to do to take care of myself, and nobody has to know.
That's right. And that's exactly what I did. And we talk about what are the three features of trauma? Fragmentation. My mind becomes like a broken puzzle that all the pieces are scattered in different places of my mind. I'm isolated because I can't reveal the truth about myself, not even to myself. I have to compartmentalize my own thinking, and there has to be good Scott and bad Scott. And I dissociate. I disconnect my feelings, and I become disintegrated in the sense that I don't know what I'm feeling other than excitement or sexual arousal, because I'm using that to escape all the bad feelings of anxiety, fear, shame. And I have nobody to be with me in this, because I'm afraid if I tell one single soul, it's over. So there's no way out of that. You just continue on until it reaches its normal and natural conclusion, which is eventually that stuff comes out. It either leaks out from you because you just can't contain it anymore, or and usually it's you make mistakes and then you're discovered, right? So that's what happened. And the way back to a place of growth and maturity is to be curious, to be kind, not to start clamping down with greater control, more shoulds, more shame, more discipline, more cognitive top-down management of everything that's going on in my life. That's just going to ratchet up all of the intense emotion and the sense of failure, right? Because it's very performance oriented. And we've already talked about a lot how performance oriented feedback or performance oriented guidance really undermines the performance in the first place. It's about progress. It's about effort. What are you doing?
It's about growth. That's what it is. It's about growth.
And so I had to get back in to really survive this, which was my initial goal. I had to get back and seeing a therapist and working on what is going on and becoming curious about that. And
well, let's stop that for a second, because you said a lot in that I think is really important. I don't want to gloss over that the mindset that you brought to doing the work after your relapse. Because I think, frankly, it's another conversation to how you do the work after relapse. What do you really focus on? But until you get to that place, as this episode is titled, and you learn to love your relapse, that this was a good thing, this failure, this, abandonment of who I am, and betrayal of, frankly, self first and others second, is too heavy for me. And Scott, I see guys that carry their relapses around like battle scars, and the first thing that they'll tell you is how they've screwed up. They'll tell you how they continue to struggle in recovery meetings and even in coaching, and they can't let go. And they can't learn to love this piece of themselves that they see as evil, bad, shameful.
yeah, yeah, it's a real mindset shift. And we've talked about this too. There are two basic kinds of mindset by which you can approach this. You can approach this from a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset says, I am stuck. I'm not going anywhere. I can't change. This is basically the way I am. I'm just flawed, and I'm going to continue to be flawed. And so I just have to learn to do the best I can with this. A growth mindset says, you know what? I'm a fallible human being. I'm not perfect. I'm not going to be perfect, but I can grow and I can learn from this. So I'm going to approach this with a learning mindset. Like, what can I do to actually benefit from this? What's the good that came from it? Why was I doing this? Let's be honest about it. If I'm really honest with myself, there's a part of me that likes sending naked pictures because, and fill in that statement with as many things that come to your mind. Take 10 minutes, just write it out to see what you were getting out of that. Because beneath the desire to send a naked picture of myself, there's a good desire to be seen. There's a good desire to want excitement, to want connection, to want brotherhood, to want camaraderie. So I don't need to vilify the goodness beneath the unhealthy behavior if I can get to what's the real legitimate needs here that this was meeting. And that's the question is, when you answer that question, if I'm really honest with myself, there's a part of me that likes doing blank. What's it doing for you? And you look at, well, all those answers, underneath them, there's really good longings and desires.
But Scott, I hold on. I can't go there. I can't. Are you telling me that my longing for porn and for acting out and for all these shameful things is actually something in me that is good, that's going to point me back toward something that really is a true aspect of who I am? Because the reality is, I'm just a bad person. I mean, you said it. I feel like I'm just ashamed of everything that I do. It doesn't matter what you tell me. You can give me all the tricks and tips all that you want to about how to understand that longing. The reality is, I don't want to understand that longing. I want to kill it.
Yeah. At what point in your life did you begin to believe that your longings are perverse?
Oh, my whole life, Scott. I'm wicked.
Yeah.
My heart is evil. There's nothing good in me.
I don't know what Bible you're reading, Chris.
Oh, it was a Southern Baptist Bible for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Oh, so you might be referring to that passage in Jeremiah where it says the heart is desperately wicked above all else. Who can trust it?
And in Romans 3, where it talks about, my throat is an open grave and nothing is good in me, no, not one.
What do you do with that passage in Ezekiel where it says, I will give you a new heart? Or
I see. No. Just
2 Corinthians where if any man's
La, la,
Christ.
la, 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 la. That doesn't keep my narrative up, Scott.
Well, I
My
know.
narrative,
I know.
my narrative is I'm a piece of shit and I'm comfortable as a piece of shit. And anytime you try to tell me there's something good in me, I'm gonna push that away because it enables me to stay stuck because I bought the lie. And guys, just so you know, I'm doing a little devil's advocate argument here. I don't truly believe this stuff, but I've heard it so many times, and I've held it for decades. But if we're going to really love our relapse, we've got to go back and have this experience with other people that someone, I spill all my junk out and someone looks at me and goes, "Is that all you got? Man, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for being vulnerable with that. I've done that and more. And let's look at that together." There's a great book called The Cure. If you've ever read the book The Cure, that's in chapter 1 of The Cure from True Faced. And that's what it's about, is learning how to love the brokenness in our lives the way that God loves that brokenness. He doesn't hate it. He doesn't judge it. He doesn't damn it to hell. He looks at it and says, "What's going on? Are you okay?"
Yeah. And I think one of the most effective trauma modalities, which is called internal family systems, really plays off of this theme of we have parts in us. It's also called parts work. So, and this is common vernacular. Chris, you want to go to the movie tonight? Well, part of me does, part of me doesn't. We all talk like that. We all recognize it. Even the Bible, David says, "Why are you so downcast, O my soul?" Or he says in Psalm 130 something, like a weaned child rests against his mother's breast, I have learned to comfort and quiet my soul. He's talking about a part of himself, right? And so we all have these parts of ourselves that kind of get fractioned off in the trauma and sequestered away, and we don't want anybody to see them, and we only bring them out when we need them to do something for us. And this trauma modality helps people really heal because it is exactly how the mind works. We do have parts of ourselves, and we develop these really fractioned, warring internal battles. And part of this healing journey is to get all of those pieces working together. And have you ever been in a place where every part of you is welcome, Chris? Every part.
I have. It was the place that invited me on this journey. It was the place that I began to believe that I wasn't a piece of crap.
Notice that.
It was the place where and this was the refrain, and I've repeated it many times: "We're glad you're here. Glad you're here. We're glad you're here. We're glad you're here."
That's the essence of delight, isn't it? I'm glad you're here. I'm happy to see you.
Yes. And let's break that apart. We, not just an individual, but a group of people, a collection of brains, a circle of spirits and souls is making this statement. They're glad. There's an excitement. There's a delight. What you just said, there's a hope. There's a happiness. There's a joy in that. We're glad you, talking about all of me, all the fucked up stuff in my life that I'm afraid to bring anywhere is welcomed, is present, and we're glad you're here. And here implies something very simple. You don't have to be anywhere else. There is not another place that you're supposed to be to receive this blessing.
And you don't have to be any different than you are right now, because every part of you is welcome, even the part that just came in drunk, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know who said this recently, but it was a beautiful statement that I would rather go to an AA meeting drunk than a church drunk, because at the AA meeting, everybody's going to go, "I'm so glad you're here. Sit down.
Yeah. Today's a new day. We're glad
get
you're
you a
here.
cup of coffee. You're in the right place."
Yeah.
But in a church, you would be looked at like, "What are you doing here? You're drunk. We don't want you here. Go sober up, then come back."
Well, the institution of the church has a lot of problems. The people that make up the true church are the people that invited me on this journey. So I don't want to shame the ecclesia, the people, the collection of called out ones. there's a lot of struggles in many places, and I want to be gracious and kind of that. But if you're on this journey and you're in a place where you're struggling to love your relapse, and it could be a slip, it could be a binge, it could be a full-blown relapse. It doesn't matter where it is. I would invite you to do a couple things. Number one, I would invite you to be vulnerable. Find the safest person that you know and sit with them and tell them where you are. And you got to do that work, my friend. Nobody's coming to rescue you in that.
Let me say a word about vulnerability. It comes from a Latin word which means willing to be wounded.
Yeah.
To be vulnerable means you're willing to drop the shields and to be authentic and to be willing to be hurt again.
And that's where that belief is created, when you're willing to be wounded and you don't get wounded. You get loved, you get accepted, you get seen. And so if you try that with one person, great. Bring that to a group of people, even more powerful to be able to have that experience. And then be consistent with that safe group of people who can give you the experience of believing that you are worth being loved in your relapse. And that's an absolute truth. And any truth less than that is going to be snake oil that somebody's selling you, because that's the only path to recovery. It's the only one. Ask anybody that's been in for a decade or more doing their work, and they'll ultimately say, I had to accept me as I was and learn that this is a process. I'll get there one day.
It's really good. It's the only way to it's the only way to change. It's the only way to get back up after a relapse and move forward. And the measure of maturity and growth, and if you want to call it holiness, whatever, is not that you don't fail. It's that you get back up and you get moving forward again, and you learn from your failure. You'll learn more from your failure.
It's the show up muscle. When you stand up and show up, you're going to grow up. That's just as simple as it gets. So guys, what we want to remind you is that you have balls. We have balls too. We're on this journey together with courage and compassion. And so keep walking, reach out to us if we can help you. We got some great opportunities that we would be glad to offer to you if you want to do that work in this space. But we're grateful to be with you. We are glad you are here today, here on We Got Balls.
And you do too.
Take care, guys. See you soon.
Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. You can connect with Chris and with Scott at successfulmen.com.